Welcome to the Sociology channel. In this lecture, we are discussing about sociology and globalization. This is part 1 of sociology and globalization. Globalization is one of the most important topic in present sociological discussion. Besides globalization, social inequality, digital revolution, and identity. These four topics are highly contextually relevant in sociology. That makes sociology and globalization quite important from examination perspective as well. Be it your civil services examination or UGC net exam or state PSC exams or school grade exams. Sociology and globalization is one of the most important topic. Let us proceed further in our discussion. The moment one starts the discussion of globalization, the people jump on to the word Coca-Cola as if the uttering of the word Coca-Cola suffices the discussion about globalization. So now I have shown you the bottle of Coca-Cola. So here finishes our lecture. Tata, bye bye, vanakkam, sayonara. But we know the lecture is not finished. We are going to discuss a lot many things. But before starting our discussion about globalization, let us learn to see, because once we learn to see, then only we can see into what globalization is. So you must be wondering that when this globalization topic is in your chapter 1, then why I have written so many something alien kind of word for you as of now along with globalization when the topic itself is coming from chapter 1. So when in exam the question comes from sociology and globalization, you are also supposed to write something which you have read in your chapter 8 or 10 or 2 or 4, because globalization is one topic which is interconnected with almost all topics, all chapters of sociology. That is the importance of globalization topic. That's why I have mentioned the word temporality, ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, social reproduction on the slide 1. You must have seen that. You must have noticed that. Now, time and temporality are different concepts, naturally. That's why we are using a complete different word. Although from sociological perspective, just like we have sociology of religion, sociology of work, sociology of family, we have sociology of time, and temporality is understood in that. Time is a political concept, is a social concept, and time is also an economical concept. That's how the term is coined. Time is money. But time has not always been money. Even in present most industrialized society where time is of high essence, hardly few years back, they were not so much so time conscious. This shows the importance of temporality, how temporality changes, how it gets influenced, how it influences other elements as well. So, time and temporality. Even in our own India, time is a very recent concept. It came with the introduction of Indian Railways by British. They issued a time chart for Indian Rails. That's how Indians started understanding about IST, Indian Standard Time. So in India also, how this concept of time impacted our temporality. That is something needs to be seen. Time is a linear progression. Today, tomorrow, 1, 2, 3, January, February. Temporality might not be as much a linear concept. Temporality is slightly complex because it gets interconnected with several other concepts. So time and temporality is different. Now comes the word ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism means looking at something from our own perspective. This is something which we are generally doing in our general life. Cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is something like opposite to ethnocentrism. I'm simplifying these definitions. I'm not going in too much detail because in this lecture we are focusing on sociology and globalization. So this cultural relativism is something where we are looking at a particular culture from that cultural perspective itself and not from our own vantage point. Social reproduction. Social reproduction in simplest sense means that the manner in which society maintains its structure or whatever kind of a structure it is having. Say, for example, how society maintains its caste system, how society maintains its religious system. And in simplest sense, one could say that how a father teaches something of crucial importance for a male to know to his son. So this is social reproduction for you. You have seen the Coca-Cola bottle and you have also understood that globalization for sociologists is a very important concept. And sociologists would be looking at globalization from several sociological perspectives. So let us now proceed further and see one interesting area from India. I have discussed these words for you: temporality, cultural relativism, ethnocentrism, and social reproduction. These terms are going to be of use when we are discussing about globalization. And when you would be writing your answer with respect to sociology and globalization, you should also be using these terms in your answer sheet. This is a scene from protest with respect to Coca-Cola. So several political parties of India protested against entry of Coca-Cola Pepsi into India. The protest was so hot that one of then existing minister was nicknamed as Coca-Cola Minister. And when George Fernandez became industry minister, he basically stopped Coca-Cola from functioning into India. It was such a huge protest. So that is the bottle of Coca-Cola for you. Bottle of Coca-Cola, the story of the bottle of Coca-Cola does not end here. The images which you are seeing as of now is from the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy. So what happens in this tribe? A bottle of Coca-Cola falls from some airplane. This tribe is not exposed to any industrial thing, so they are very surprised about its usage. And one of the tribe member, who is our protagonist in this story, finds a unique uses about it, but quickly this turns into a conflict, and the source of the conflict is this bottle. So this bottle must be disposed of, just like any evil thing requires to be disposed. So this is a very interesting movie. This movie basically raises several points of anthropology and sociology. This movie is a must watch for all students of sociology. Let us proceed further. Now, to some, this may be a humble stone, but to some other, when it is being put in a special place, when it is uh, garlanded with certain items, and when it is kept in a certain condition, divinity is felt in this stone. The God, the idea of God. How person from two different culture would look at the same thing differently. So now you recall the words which I had discussed previously: ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, social reproduction, temporality. To some, this is something like food item as they eat chicken. But to some, this is something which is not allowed. So we are seeing the difference between two culture, two people. Now, the images which we are seeing, one is of Christmas tree, decorated Christmas tree, and one is two children in school dress. To some, it would feel very surprising that when children visit to school for educational purpose, for learning some life skills, academic skills, why wearing a special uniform is necessary, special school dress. Not only that, school dress is slightly different, but it is also written in a very clear perspective that what kind of design it would hold, what kind of pant a boy is supposed to wear or a girl is supposed to wear. So to some, it would feel like a very disturbing idea of a school uniform. But when in India, you say some parents, hey, you are sending your child to school, but why she is wearing such a dress? It does not looks nice on her. So the parents would be surprised what kind of person he is. The objective of school, the objective of going to school is to wear a school dress. That is. And similarly, to some, it will not make any sense that on the eve of some festival, you cut a tree, you bring it inside, and you decorate it. How does it make sense? But to some, it is whole idea of nostalgia, happiness. Let us proceed further. Shamans of two different culture. Several cultures have shamans, mystics, pandits. So shamans of two different culture. How you would look at these images? Now, social reproduction. Look into this idea. How the women is taught social reproduction through capitalism. The advertisement is released by some seller, some big seller, industry manufacturer. And also see, I have written a word whisper. Now you see the dictionary meaning of this word. How come a popular company named its brand Whisper? Such a simple English name. What idea they are trying to communicate through this? Why my some bodily discharge needs to be kept so much as a secret? What is different in that particular society? I am neither questioning the idea, I am neither agreeing with the idea, I am just raising some sociological questions. And I am sharing this example with you so that you are able to understand the concept of social reproduction. Let us proceed further. So now you have seen that globalization. Globalization is not just a global westernization. Globalization is several things in several manners. But generally it is understood as westernization, global westernization or westernization. Why? Because of we saw Renaissance, we saw Enlightenment, and then we saw Industrial Revolution, everything coming from West. Western imperialism, colonialism, Asian values, how this all is related to globalization. Fundamentalism. So, does this makes globalization a new curse? Let us proceed further. Now, this is a map. This map is divided using Brandt line. This line was drawn during 1980. This divided the entire world into northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere kind of, but this is slightly different. This divides the entire world into global north and global south. You will see that leaving Australia and New Zealand, the entire global north is comparatively richer than global south. Why it is so? There could be many reasons, because the manner in which the politics of that company works, the manner in which they have resources, the manner in which they have health and education, the manner in which they have conflicts or absence of conflicts within their nation or with other nation. The reasons could be plenty, but the point is that such a concept is there, a concept of global north and global south, whereby global north is richer than global south. Globalization. International covenants. India is a signatory to not only India, actually entire world. Even Somalia is signatory to United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, UNCRC. International covenants. After that, international institutions. These institutions like World Trade Organization, UNICEF, World Bank, they are operating all across world. Thus, we see that globalization is studied from several perspectives. Economics studies the economic dimensions of globalization. Political science studies the changing political environments, changing of governments, and sociology. Sociology studies everything from local to global perspective, from micro to macro perspective, from individual to society. Sociology studies globalization from multi-dimensional perspective. Impact of globalization is could be seen on farming. It is also studied on jobs, grocery, retail, in a rural area, urban area, education, culture, how this globalization has impacted the curriculum of India. Swami Vivekananda at the Parliament of the World's Religions uttered the word, brothers and sisters of America. Are you connecting it to some concepts which we discussed just now? The decimal system. India started it. From India, it went to Arabs. That's why it is called as Arabic numerals by Europeans. From Arabs, it reached uh, Europe. So India, Arab to Europe. And this happened some more than 1,000 years back, a millennium. This is a scene from a movie Eat, Pray, Love. Julia Roberts is seen in this setting. This is a scene from Uttar Pradesh. Indian troops in Japanese prisoner of war camp. How Indians reached there? Whose war these Indians were fighting? During 1660s, around 500 tons of saltpeter, that is gunpowder, were exported from India to British. Silk Route succinctly shows how entire world was connected to each other. We saw how Coca-Cola met with a protest in India. Similarly, this is the image which you are seeing as of now is from Seattle. protest at Seattle. So that's why I have written that even protest about globalization is globalized. Now, let us read this text from the book of Amartya Sen, The Argumentative Indian, and let us look about globalization into these texts. I'll read along with you. You can read from screen. Despite its quintessential Indianness, there is a general understanding that in an early form, Sanskrit came to India from abroad in the second millennium BCE with the migration of Indo-Europeans, and then it developed further and flourished magnificently in India. It is also interesting to note that the greatest grammarian in Sanskrit, indeed possibly in any language, namely Panini, who systematized and transformed Sanskrit grammar and phonetics around the 4th century BC, was of Afghan origin. He describes his villas on the banks of the river Kabul. These foreign connections have not diminished the pride of classically minded Indians in that great language, nor in the exceptional achievements of the literature, culture, and science that found its expression in Sanskrit. The language Sanskrit was used by Aryabhatta, Valmiki. So that's why Amartya Sen is asserting this fact. Let us proceed further and read more text from this same book. It is through global movements of ideas, people, goods, and technology that different regions of the world have tended, in general, to benefit from progress and development occurring in other regions. The direction of interregional movements of ideas has varied over history, and these directional variations are important to recognize. Since the global movement of ideas is sometimes seen just as ideological imperialism of the West, as a one sided movement that simply reflects an asymmetry of power which needs to be resisted. Since we are seeing it something as a westernized idea, as a westernization, we are resisting it. That's the argument made by Amartya Sen. Let us proceed further and read more text from this book itself. It may in fact be instructive to contemplate the nature of the world, not at the end of the millennium that we have just ushered out, but at the end of the previous millennium. Around 1000 CE, globalization of science, technology, and mathematics was changing the nature of the old world, even though, as it happens, the principal currents of dissemination then were typically in the opposite direction to what we see today. This text continues with next slide. So let's continue. For example, the high technology in the world of 1000 CE included paper and printing, the crossbow and gunpowder, the wheelbarrow and the rotary fan, the clock and the iron chain suspension bridge, the kite and the magnetic compass. Every one of these high-tech fields of knowledge in the world a millennium ago was well established in China and at the same time was practically unknown elsewhere. So Amartya Sen succinctly argues that globalization is not a westernized concept. At some point of time it was flowing from east to west, and at some point of time it is flowing from west to east, but presently it is understood as a westernization. Dear friend, that is temporality for you. How we see time. Let us proceed further. So, we see that globalization is not merely about dominance of Western ideas and beliefs. It is actually including global heritage, interdependence, and in present time, it is about various movements which moved from west to across world like democracy, gender justice, equality, fair trials. Although in the same book from which I shared the text, Amartya Sen also discusses that whether democracy, equality, and fair trials are actually purely Western concept. So now you know he must have argued that it is something which is quite an Eastern concept, quite an Indian concept. Let us proceed further. Now, this is a scene from the movie Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, in short DDLJ. I saw this movie when I was in grade 8. Then it was pure entertainment. But after that, when I studied sociology, I visited this movie in my brain time and again as a sociologist. From image, you will see that even if you have not seen this movie, from image you can make out that the daughter Kajol wants to go with his boyfriend Shah Rukh Khan, but the father Amrish Puri has certain objections. Amrish Puri is holding the hand of his daughter Kajol, but Amrish Puri looks stunned. The father looks stunned, perplexed, shocked, sad. Several emotions could be seen from the face of Amrish Puri. Of course, he is a marvelous actor. And an Indian will think, anyone who has not seen this movie will think that this must be some kind of caste angle and father is objecting to the marriage because of that. But that is not at all the case. Everyone, all protagonists of this movie, be it father, daughter, or Shah Rukh Khan, everyone is well settled in America. They are Indian, yet American citizen. Amrish Puri, an Indian American citizen, wants to wed his daughter to an Indian boy who is well settled in India. Amrish Puri has certain beliefs. He wants to see his family practice his beliefs through certain way. That's why he wants to wed his daughter to an Indian boy who is well settled in India. Now say Amrish Puri lives in America, and if he weds his daughter in India, he will be able to visit his daughter less often in comparison to if he weds off his daughter to her love of life Shah Rukh Khan, who is well settled in America. He'd be able to visit more often. But whenever when Amrish Puri, the father's daughter, wants to go with her boyfriend, he is having objection. Why he is having objection? How this entire angle is working? Do we see marriage as same as an Indian American citizen? American citizen from Indian origin. I mean that. Do we see culture in the same manner? Do we see religion in the same manner? Why we are seeing things differently? This movie raises several questions. It needs to be understood from globalization perspective. And that's how you are going to connect each concept in its practical manner. And that's how you will bring beauty to your answers by appreciating the concept, by understanding the concept, and by keeping it there. Let us move further. Dimensions of globalization. The sociology of globalization encompasses a wide range of interconnected areas. When it comes to sociology, whenever you are doing cross section of some point, whenever you are looking in depth with respect to certain point, you must always carry four words: social, economical, political, cultural. Here also, the sociology of globalization encompasses all these four dimensions, is interconnected with all these four dimensions: social, economical, political, and cultural. As a sociologist, while studying globalization, we are seeing how these dimensions are interacting and shaping society at local, national, and global levels. Before proceeding further, let us give a quick read to all the dimensions in one go so that even on a superficial level, we are able to appreciate the interconnectedness of all these dimensions: economic, global, labor, employment, political changes, culture, gender, culture of consumption. As a sociologist, by economic dimensions, we see significant economic implications made by globalization. Sociology is seeing the increased interconnectedness and interdependence of economies throughout world. Nations, businesses, all of them have become more integrated, be it trade, investment, technology, everything. All such economic dimensions are now creating changes on a global scale. But this may lead to both positive and negative outcomes. Positive, increased economic growth, increased opportunities. Negative, potential exploitation, inequality between different nations, social groups. How it is happening? Now, global communications. Communication is something which we are witnessing on a daily basis, even in our normal life. We want to look for something and we'll look it on Google. We access the information from across the world. We are seeing that day in, day out, we all are connected on the same social media, be it Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. This globalization has transformed how people are communicating and connecting across the world. All these technological advancements which has taken place, be it internet or social media or any other technology, AI, what are they doing? They are facilitating communication. Now, the speed of communication is huge. Communication happens on an instantaneous level. We can make our videos live and reach across world. The exchange of ideas, information, exchange of culture is happening across borders. Same Facebook group is having members from across the world. If you are entering into a particular discussion You are witnessing the views of people from across the world. So if you have certain view and you are putting it on social media, a person from maybe South Africa, maybe Latin American nations, maybe America, they can comment on that. And now you are exposed to a culture defying borders. You are exposed to diverse perspectives and ideologies. Earlier, you were limited to yourself. In Sanskrit, it is called Kup Mandukam, not able to look beyond ourselves, beyond a well in which the frog is living. Now, there is no constraint like that. Labor. Labor is now moving across world, and labor is also now the most critical aspect of globalization. It is not moving just from one nation to another nation, looking for work or for employment opportunity. When it moves from one place to other, it is not only impacting culture, it can also impact law, crime, the visa facilitation process, forced labor, losing power of negotiation with employer. It can lead to many things. Now, when we are talking about labor rights, we'll not be only talking about with respect to our nation. We'll be talking about across borders. And the human trafficking gets facilitated due to this heavy movement of labor, globalization. Employment. Globalization has affected the pattern of employment significantly. The engineers, the data scientists, the MBAs, now they are not only working in India, sitting in India, they are working for across the world because they are working for multinational organizations, transnational organizations. I remember one incident from 2000. In 2000, call centers cropped up in very huge manner in India. I could see youngsters speaking English in American accent, European accent, in accent of some remote island nations. And they used to be trained over this particular accent in some 10-12 days. They started earning huge money. It created a complete new level of employment. But now the market is saturated. The same labor which was involved in call center services, where they would have shifted, how it would have impacted their personal and professional life, their family, their growth, their business decisions, their career related decisions, academic decisions. The globalization has impacted heavily this employment. One sector wide change impacts the entire employment structure of the world. With rise of AI, the demand for engineers and data scientists will go up. Equally, the demand for such courses among labor will go up. That is how it is impacting. Political changes. Globalization has impacted the political landscape in a very huge manner. Now the power dynamics among nations have shifted. Even the heads of nation is playing a very significant role in discussing about visa application process. The number of visa applicants and the number of visa which would be issued. Such discussion now happens at the peak level. The nation's heads like prime ministers and presidents are involved into such discussion. How this is impacting the sovereignty of a nation, the governance of a nation, how it can exclude a particular nation, include a particular nation, or exclude a particular area and include a particular area. You can check on news. Recently, some university of some nation clearly said that they are not accepting application from certain states of India. Facilitation from some, for some, obstruction for some. So this entire change which is happening has become so much so important that this is discussed at the highest level of bureaucracy, highest level of governance, that is the prime ministers and presidents. It shows the importance. A normal visa application process. Culture. Of course, culture comes along with everything. Globalization has a profound impact on culture. Through internet, the exchange of ideas. When we make enter into an exchange of idea, it is just it is not just exchange of idea. It is exchange of values, exchange of cultural practices. This exchange, will it lead to homogenization or hybridization? Cultural exchanges happening across societies. This may help in eradicating conflict, but it also may give rise to some dominant global culture. It may also marginalize some local cultural expressions, local cultural practices. So everything is now happening at a very different level. Gender. Globalization has affected gender in a profound manner. The gendered role, it has impacted even that. With globalization, opening of world, opening of industries, now women have more opportunity to work. And not only that, some of the transnational and multinational organizations They bring their own idea of gender equality, which is discussed within the organization. And once it starts impacting the gender norms within that organization, it will start or it starts impacting the gender norms of family. What happens between 9 to 5? Does it stays only there or it moves? This exposure of a woman living in a particular nation to several diverse cultures is impacting the idea of gender equality in a very different manner. Culture of consumption. You must have seen yourself now the technological products like laptop, mobile are getting discarded hardly in 3, 4, 5 years or changed. Now, the idea to get technological equipment repaired is also moving away from India. How our culture of consumption is changing. It gives rise to a new opportunity for a sociologist to understand the pattern of consumption, to understand the consumer behavior, to understand the buyers and sellers pattern. And this is happening across boundaries. I still remember comment from one head of a mobile company when during lockdown in 2020 entire world was closed and each industry was getting impacted. That gentleman, the owner of that company or maybe the CEO of that company, said that categorically he said that we need to maintain our production to the same level because you cannot stop yourself from discarding the equipment, from changing your equipment. This is how much he understands the culture of consumption. He clearly said, my business is not going to be impacted. If you are supposed to keep a mobile or laptop with you for 3 years, you are supposed to keep it for 3 years. If you are supposed to keep it for 2 years, you are supposed to keep it for 2 years. You are not going to change it. Understanding culture of consumption, consumer behavior, these are some very new areas for a sociologist to look into when it comes to globalization. Let us proceed further. Temporality. This is the reason that in the beginning of the lecture itself, I discussed the concept of temporality. Temporal conjunctions of globalization. It refers to the ways in which globalization and its various aspects are intertwined with the concept of time. Understand this difference. Once something else gets intertwined with the concept of time, it gives rise to temporality. Globalization gets intertwined with the concept of time, it becomes temporality. The concept of temporality is very important for sociology of each area. Sociology of education, sociology of childhood, sociology of gender, sociology of religion. So it has become essential to understand the temporality of globalization so that we are able to grasp social processes which are influencing and getting influenced by globalization. Social processes, it's going both way because we know change could happen in any direction. We have discussed this within this lecture itself. Spaces. You will notice that, as we had discussed with other point as well, how the boundaries between different spaces has now become obsolete. World is highly interconnected now. And from sociological perspective, this phenomenon is having significant implications. It is impacting social relationships. So, as a sociologist, when we are looking into spaces, we need to see how social relationships are now formed across physical distances. How this compression of space brought by globalization is changing ideas, ideologies, cultural practices. How this is facilitating the movement of people, the movement of goods, the movement of ideas. How it is giving emergence of global identities. Place. Now, there is a difference between space and place. Place means the specific locations where social interactions and activities are taking place. Globalization can alter the entire meaning and significance of the places. It can connect them on a global network, or it can bring them down to a small dot on an entire global network. It can increase the interconnectedness of places. And when such things are happening, for a sociologist, it becomes necessary to understand how this increasing interconnectedness of places is leading to homogenization or hybridization of local cultures, local practices, and how it may or it is giving rise to complex sociocultural dynamics. Within temporality, now we are seeing the point of time. Time. Temporality refers to the impact of time on social processes. It's not the same thing as time. Always keep in mind this concept. Now you will see the spread of information takes place at phenomenally high level. The moment war breaks out, we are updated. The moment earthquake visits a place, we are updated. The moment a tragedy strikes, we are updated. The moment a company comes up, we are updated. The speed and intensity with this information is moving across global is influencing several aspects of societies. And not only information, even the speed of movement of capital and of course people, speed with which people move has increased phenomenally. You will recall the reason why I shared the image of Swami Vivekananda. At what speed he moved. Now, scale. Through other points also, we understood that now globalization operates at a very different scale, very high scale, from local to global, everything, scale of everything, scale of interconnectedness, interdependence, everything has increased. It will give rise to some positives, but it will also give rise to certain negatives. Earlier, inequality was in a particular society. Now, due to scale, we'll be discussing the ideas of global inequality. We will look into the full complexity which the change of this scale is bringing in, be it migration, be it environmental problems. We need to consider everything. Network. Globalization as of now is facilitated through this interconnectedness of network of communication which we use on a daily basis, trade, finance, capital, education exchanges, information exchange. Now, even our social relation is getting impacted because of all this networked thing, because it is impacting not only economic activity but also political dynamics, social dynamics. How this diffusion of idea across networks is impacting our social structure. What is this pattern of influence? How this interconnectedness of network, which is network of networks, is influencing our social structure or is supporting our social structure. Positionality. Positionality refers to the social position and standpoint of individuals as well as groups. And since we are bringing in the concept of globalization, we will say individuals and groups within the global context. Positionality. We discussed power, changing power imbalance. How globalization is creating this. Inequality. How globalization is either removing it or exacerbating it. inequality of be it class, gender, race, nationality. So sorry, understanding positionality becomes crucial for sociologists so that they analyze how different groups are responding to the consequences of globalization which they are facing. Increased travel and communications. We can see it on a daily basis that globalization has increased our travel, and in previously also we discussed that it has also increased the communications, because now the communication technologies are highly improved, not only in the form of video call but also in the form of the quality of the call and the speed at which the video call data is getting transferred from one place to other. So as a sociologist we need to understand this. Now even Indians holiday destinations are several foreign locations: Thailand, Indonesia, America, Switzerland. We need to understand, as a sociologist, we need to understand that how this increased travel is interacting outside culture and is impacting and is shaping the identity of that individual and society, is impacting the social norms which we are having here, and the cultural exchange which we are making with that particular nation. We need to understand all of these things. Context of colonial and neo-colonial encounters. We discussed previously in the same video that how colonialism shaped the entire direction of globalization, how it impacted the temporality, the culture. Similarly, neocolonialism is shaping, due to globalization, everything, be it cultural, be it social, or the power dynamics which was in colonial times or in neo-colonial time. Has it stayed same? Has it changed? How this is impacting our social relation? As a sociologist, we need to understand that now. We need to see inclusion, exclusion, inequality, equality in a globalized context. Let us proceed further. Changing of the idea of modernity. How globalization is impacting our idea of modernity, our conception about urbanization, the manner in which we see modernity as of now. Is it coming from our own construction about modernity, or globalization has impacted it? Has globalization complicated the notion of modernity for us? The manner in which we connect the production, the idea of production, the progress, the development with the notion of modernity. Is it our inherent cultural thought? Across societies, across different societies, do they experience modernity in similar ways or diverse ways? How this modernity is influenced by historical contexts, the idea of temporality, how the idea of modernity is interacting with global forces. As a sociologist, we examine this impact of the construction of modernity and how societies negotiate their identities in a globalized world. The entire conception is changing, and it is changing rapidly. Changing practices. We discussed this previously also, how globalization is leading the diffusion of technology across societies. With diffusion of technology, it is also bringing new practices. And this new practice is coming in all dimensions, be it social, cultural, political, or economical. As a sociologist, we examine how globalization influences this adoption and adaptation to the new practices, the transformation of traditional customs, the emergence of hybrid practices, and the blending and homogenization of both local and global elements. Popular culture, sometime Elvis Presley, some other time Michael Jackson, and present BTS. This ideation of popular culture is changing constantly and continuously. The media, be it Netflix, movie, the entertainment, the exchange of goods, how this is impacting the ideation of popular culture. As a sociologist, we examine how these cultural exchanges is shaping identities. It is impacting consumer behavior. It is impacting social norm and how different cultures are responding to it. The idea of global influencers on Instagram. The Instagram influencers are global influencers now. A product is bought even in remote village because of Instagram global influencers. The entire ideation and idea of popular culture is changing. Changing relations of power. Globalization does both positives and negatives. We discussed this several times. It can reinforce existing power structure or create a new dynamics of power structure. Transnational corporations, multinational companies, international organizations, all these are having significant impact not only on nation but also on states and also on village and rural area. As a sociologist, we examine how this power is exercised at a global level and also at a local level, how it is affecting the social and economic inequality at a global level and also at a local level, at a village level. New idea of inclusion and exclusion. We discussed it previously as well. How globalization has led to complex process of inclusion and exclusion. The idea which was limited to a space, a place, a nation is now active at a global level. Due to globalization, now even stereotypes would work in a very different manner. Some individuals and group will gain access to new opportunity, new resources, while others may face marginalization, exclusion. As a sociologist, we identify and explore these mechanisms of inclusion and exclusion, which is now happening at a global level. Thus, the new idea of inclusion and exclusion is coming. Impact on social reproduction. This is the reason why I discussed about social reproduction at the beginning of the lecture itself. Social reproduction refers to the process through which societies maintain its societal structures, norms, values across its generations. In certain context, the social reproduction would mean that the process through which societies maintains and perpetuates. Within the case of India, it also perpetuates the idea of patriarchy, the idea of caste. So, the social reproduction process is something through which societies maintains and perpetuates social structures, norms, and values across generations. But we saw the example of DDLJ, although not a very appropriate example, but you can connect it just to remember for an easy memory. Globalization can disrupt or rather reinforce these processes. What we see in the context of the father of DDLJ, the father of Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, the social reproduction process could be disrupted or could even be reinforced. As a sociologist, we identify the mechanism how this flow of labor, the movement of labor, the flow of ideas, the flow of capital is impacting our family structure, our education system, and our cultural exchanges. How it is influencing the idea about reproduction of this social inequality. Changing ideologies. We discussed it previously also. The exchange of ideas brings the exchange and exposure to diverse culture, the exchange of value systems. And with that exchange, the society may start to re examine, reassess their process of reassess their beliefs, their norms. The idea of nationalism, the idea of democracy. As a sociologist, we examine how these ideologies shape social and political movements not only at global level but also at a local level. Changing geographies. We discussed it by breaking it into several components. How we have become network of networks. How we define spaces, places. How the entire conception through which we see geography has now changed. Thus, we understand the importance that globalization has altered the entire meaning of geography. But as we discussed, that it may bring positives as well as negatives. But as sociologists, we will analyze the implications of globalization on this spatial aspects, how this is impacting our growth of cities, how it is impacting development of our regions. Is it same across India? How globalization has impacted that which cities would be chosen to grow fast while other cities will be left behind. Globalization has altered the entire meaning of geography for us. Let us proceed further. Thus, we see that with respect to sociology and globalization, we discuss, we examine the spatial, temporal, and social dimensions of globalization. As a sociologist, we are required to put light on the complex interactions of global processes from local to global, from individual to society. It also brings to the context that the society is ever changing, and as a sociologist, we need to understand this ever changing dynamics now in a global context. Let us proceed further. Cultural relativism. This is the reason I discussed the definition of cultural relativism, the idea of cultural relativism in the beginning of the lecture. As a sociologist, we need to examine that how the position of cultural relativism is getting impacted due to globalization. How globalization is impacting our culturally constructed institutions. Preschools, schools, education system, curriculum, pedagogy, all these are culturally constructed institutions. how globalization is shaping our beliefs, practices into these systems. How globalization is impacting it. We know that India is a collectivist society and America is considered to be an individualist society. But how this idea of globalization, when put with cultural relativism, may show us a changing picture, a different picture. As a sociologist, we need to examine it constantly. Let us proceed further and close our lecture. We'll also meet in part 2, but this actually suffices most of the discussions which is required with respect to sociology and globalization. We understood that globalization is not only anti-Western rhetoric or pro-Western chauvinism. It is about how we are creating a global civilization, how we are creating a new identity of world citizen. Thank you very much for joining me. See you in next lecture.